First of all, thank you, Claire, so much for this. I think we are really in a process right now where we're already trying to research this problem, where we're trying to address it, but we still don't know what we're talking about. So I think that was a really insightful lightning talk. So I'm Lisa Maria Neudert. I am a researcher at the Computational Propaganda Project in Oxford. We have been looking into misinformation since 2012. We started with the Arab Spring, and we've seen the same phenomenon as Claire just described. Nobody cared, then all of a sudden last year Brexit happened, Donald Trump happened, and now people start to care. So in my work, I've been looking into misinformation and how this misinformation is actually used by algorithms, by bots, and by hackers, by people that are trying to amplify it around the world, and that are trying to influence public political life. They're trying to influence referenda, they're trying to influence elections. But more than that, I think it's very important to stress that this misinformation is also impacting our everyday life. So it's not just the elections and the referenda, but it's sowing discontent, it is sowing confusion, and it is really sowing fears among the public. So 2014 was the year when the World Economic Forum said the spread of online misinformation is going to be one of the top 10 threats to society within the next couple of years. And I think 2016 was the year when this has become real. All of a sudden, our politics are post-truth, our media system is relying on alternative facts. We have a lot of confusion in the public how to address these issues and what is right and what is wrong. I think that we're at a point right now where we are realizing that misinformation is a global problem, that it's not just a problem that is happening on the fringe, but that it's a problem that it's in the political mainstream, and also a problem that is not going to go away. It's more than a trend. In Oxford, we think it is more than a trend. It is more than a couple of hoaxes that got big on the internet because of how the internet works. We also think it's more than Macedonian teenagers who are trying to make a profit from that. It is because we think it's a new form of propaganda. We think it's a form of propaganda that is happening online and that is potentially more impactful than propaganda has ever been before. So a couple of you now.
Can you come back for a second?
Sure. This is by Axios. I love this a lot. I love this a lot, yeah. Can't take credit, but it looks absolutely incredible. Okay, so next one, propaganda. Now, that is the topic that probably most of us will have heard about, and I think a couple of you will come up to me and say propaganda, that is something that we have heard of before. Propaganda actually is about as old as politics itself. Alexander the Great already had propaganda. He was traveling with his own PR team. And we also, of course, had propaganda in World War II, in World War I, and for example, in Germany, I'm German, in the GDR, which is not that long ago. And I think you will also say propaganda also has always gone with the media. When people couldn't read, we had propaganda in sermon and chants. Then it evolved to the printing press. With that, we had it with cartoons and with pictures. And then we had it spreading to newspapers, to the radios, to TV, and also to the big movie screens. So now online media only seems the next logical step and the next evolution of propaganda. But I do think that the propaganda we are having now is very different and more impactful than what we had before for various reasons. I've broken it down into a hopefully simple formula. So on the one hand, you still have manipulation. That is the very key essence of propaganda, and that is what it's trying to do. And it's trying to manipulate in a way that is emotional and that is speaking to the heart and not so much to the mind. Then what's different now is the channel. We have social media. Social media is, of course, where user-generated content is formed. So propaganda now is directly something that users can create. It has never been so easy to produce a professional YouTube video, to produce a professional blog post, to even produce a professional online publication as it has been with online media and with user-generated content on social media. And then the second two things that are different are the methods. One method is automation. So propaganda is actually automated in the way it is creating content and also in the way it's disseminating and distributing content. It works with algorithms, it works with bots. So it's not always actively a human that is involved in all of those decisions, but it's an algorithm that is acting on behalf of a human. And then the second big point, and that is bringing me to my talk today, is big data. The difference is now with propaganda, the agents know something about whom they want to target. They know which content we like to engage in, they know where we are online, they know how long we're spending our time online, and with that, they can tailor these custom-made propaganda solutions, if you want to say so, to really optimize propaganda content. And with that, we have a new form of propaganda, which we call computational propaganda. It's faster, it is more targeted, and it is personal now. It is individual propaganda content. And I think that really changes the game of propaganda. So what does that mean in relation to misinformation? We too have been looking into elections over the past couple of months. We have been looking into the US elections, the French elections, the UK elections, and the Germany elections. And we wanted to see how big is that misinformation phenomenon actually. There's a lot of talk on that, yet still, I think all of you in the room have heard talks about like, is misinformation really a problem? I haven't seen that much in my newsfeed. Maybe it's not that bad actually. So we wanted to actually get some facts about misinformation. We did this by going online, by going to social media and looking into Twitter conversations in relation to those elections. And then we were collecting the URLs. We have collected tens of millions of URLs, and with a team of coders have been parsing out how much of the content being shared was misinformation and how much was information. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you the relationship of misinformation, which is going to be red, and information, so that would be news, that would be professional content in blue. So in the US is our sad leader here. For every piece of information, for every piece of news, we had one piece of misinformation being shared on social media. It's better in European countries. In the French elections, we saw a relationship of 7-1. In the UK and in the German elections, we saw roughly 20% of misinformation being shared. But I think this still shows that misinformation was omnipresent in elections in the last year in democracies, and that this is far from a fringe problem. So I've just told you that we are at a point where we're having big data-driven propaganda, that we are at a point where we are having propaganda that is everywhere in all of the Western democracies right now. But yet, when we are talking about this problem, I think we're still at a point where we're being data illiterate. Why do I think we're still being data illiterate? Why do I think this debate really lacks scale, and this debate really lacks the quantities that we want to address? For example, debunking. Just as Claire brought it up right now, we as researchers know a lot about how debunking should work and also what we need to do in order to make it in a way that it's impactful. But however, all over the world, all over in Germany, for example, there's fact checkers popping up right now that are giving more prominence to these issues and that are not properly debunking, but instead inflating those issues. Then a couple of journalists also have proclaimed happily that finally we know how Russia has hacked Facebook over the elections, because Facebook has come forward with Russia has bought $100,000 of advertising on our platform. To put this into scale, this is less than 0%. It's 0.0% of Facebook's annual advertising revenue. This is nothing. And yet it's still a debate that we're leading. So with all those questions where we're not sure what is the scale of this misinformation issue, what is actually in the data, how important is that? I want to bring the conversation back to the data today. I'm going to start at the very beginning with this. A couple of years ago, when we were looking into data and metrics in relation to journalistic content, we didn't have that many metrics and we didn't have that many data. We really just had one, which was the circulation. And we had that data as, for example, when you were a newspaper, to see how is my content performing, how should I design my content, and what is it that my audience is seeking. With social media, that has changed drastically. We now have thousands of different metrics. We have reach, we have clicks, we have likes, we have interactions, we have engagement, we have shares, and that's not all of the metrics that are out there. There is a plethora of metrics, there's a plethora of data points that are being created. We have millions of different data points, we have millions of different users, and I admit that it's quite the jungle to actually get through this. And I think that is actually what we have to do now. I think we are at a point now where people have figured out how to use those metrics and how to use them in a way that misinformation is being targeted towards us and we're being exploited by that. However, we have not figured out how we can actually make use of those metrics to address it. And in order to bring a little bit of light in the debate, I have framed three metrics which I think are very important looking forward that I have called misinfometrics. So first of all, I know I'm speaking to an educated audience today, but why are metrics on social media so important? So every piece of content that you will see on Twitter, on social media, will come with a couple of metrics that are clearly visible to you. So that will be the likes, that will be the retweets. And that matters. That matters because social information matters to people. For example, imagine the situation you're in a museum and there will always be that one picture that 8 people are standing in front of taking photographs of right now. And more or less automatically, knowing nothing about art, I just made that assumption about the room, you will walk up to that picture as well and say like, okay, this is something 8 people have already verified this decision, and I trust those 8 people maybe a little bit to say that this is an important piece of content. And the same thing can happen on social media. And the situation is even worse because algorithms are responding to this exact human logic as well. So that means if algorithms see a piece of content that is engaged with a lot, they will give it more prominence, they will give it more visibility by setting it to trending or by putting it on top of the newsfeed. So problem number 1 are manipulative metrics. We have bots, we have trolls that are engaging with content on social media, manipulating those metrics, and they are not related to what the information is they're actually sharing, but they're about sheer mass and about making a piece of content seem more important than it is. They're manufacturing consent here. The next problem is public interest metrics. That is a term I've borrowed from Jonathan Albright. And that is because I think all of those metrics that we're looking at should be of public interest to us. If you are talking to the New York Times, I swear to you, those guys will know what the Washington Post is doing and which content for the Washington Post is performing well and why they think that is. Why do we not know that about misinformation publications? Why have we not looked into that content? Why have we not looked into patterns for this? I don't know. The next big question is public interest metrics are not shared with us in an extent that we would want them to be shared. Big companies like Facebook and Twitter are slowly coming forward with data right now. And I think it's our responsibility to pressure them for more data and to think about ways how we can have trusted research relationships with those companies. The third problem are attention economy metrics. On social media, for social platforms, it's good for them if you have people engaging with their content, because for them that means more advertising revenue. It's also great for the people that are creating their content. We are in a social media system that is directly measured and monetized by clicks and by other attention economy metrics. And so right now, where we're in a situation where attention seems to speak louder with misinformation and also with information and content that is borderline, that is clickbaity, that is confusing. We will still have publishers in the political mainstream. We will still have people trying to disseminate propaganda. We will still have Macedonian teenagers trying to exactly exploit this attention. The people from Data and Society have labeled that attention hacking, and I find it an incredibly suitable term for this. So, but I've also said earlier that I think data is not only the problem we're looking at, but that it's also a little bit of the solution. And my idea, which I want to discuss later with you, is how can we hack attention back? How can we take back the internet, and how can we make sure that we get attention to the information and not to the misinformation? I think 3 points here are important. One of them being appeal. I think it's important that we think about how can we make journalistic content more appealing to emotions. How can we make sure we get information across with emotions, with ways that humans actually respond to? Because right now, misinformation is doing that, and they're doing a pretty good job and are being much louder than our information. The second idea is to audit algorithms. Facebook and Twitter, they're not going to share how their algorithms work. It's their secret Coca-Cola recipe. They're not going to do that. And if they're regulated to do so, it will take a long time. So I think as researchers, what we can do now is do audit studies, find out more about the dynamics, and also about what algorithms are really giving attention to. And the third point is to advance. And by advance, I mean, broadly speaking, advance research on misinformation. Advance the types of misinformation, the definitions that we are having, advance how it is spreading, advance if it's spreading in specific social networks, if it's spreading in echo chambers. That is all research that we have only just begun, yet this problem is already at a global scale. So I think there's a lot of us to work on in the next couple of years. Thank you.